So over the years, when you've worked on these more bigger brands, let's call them bigger brands, and you look at it, in your mind, you think, well, there's a million things we can do, but how do you personally prioritize things that will generate the biggest impact?
Yeah, it's I mean, it's a good question. The famous SEO question about how do you prioritize properly, and I think from a tech point of view, it's difficult, right? Because like if it was content, you can put keywords, you can put some rough forecast together about what the sub landscape looks like. I think for tech, some of it comes down to experience, right? Once you've worked on a range of sites, you're able to see what's worked on previous sites versus other sites. But also, I do think you get that understanding of like what are the things that Google is actually getting frustrated about that website. So, for example, like you've allowed the whole internal site search to be crawled, and then you've given it some directive about how to not crawl it, but you're still seeing that issue, and it's like 20% of the site, whatever. By doing that, you can then free up like resource and discoverability and stuff for the correct pages, which is inherently going to help those pages rank better because they're going to get crawled more often. Versus we've built the pagination in a way that's not user friendly, which means Google can't see the products. Again, you're going to know that stuff, and that should be a high priority because it's like, hey, if Google can only see 10% of your product catalog, yes, those product searches might not have high volume, but those pages are the pages that actually are commercially driven, right? Like they're pages that if someone lands on that keyword, even if it has 5 searches a month, the likelihood is if your value proposition is correct, they'll convert. And I think that's where you can look at the site as a collective and say, right, that's a key thing. But I do think like we as SEOs get, in some regard, hung up too much on like, Google said this, so we should scramble and go and change it. Like I remember, I think it was like a couple of years ago where Google announced they're changing the pagination. They were like, we haven't followed their next and prev tags for ages. And suddenly like, there's just an outburst of people being like, we should go and remove this. It's like, have you actually tested to see if any other search engines are using it? And is there actually a different benefit to having it in the code? But then before you know it, like I still see today where like pagination is not done with the new guidelines of what Google said. And it's like, that doesn't help because there's no, from Google's point of view, I don't think there's a coherent, like, this is what you should focus on and this is what you should do. And you only have to go and look at Twitter and like some of the people on Twitter that talk about it, it's like one article about one thing will say one thing, and then Google's latest documentation will say a different thing. And then before you know it, you've got devs reading one thing, SEOs reading the other. You've got a conflict in approach, which annoys devs, and then that relationship breaks down on prioritization. But I do think it comes down to like, what's the impact level you think it's going to have, and then also get devs involved to say how much of an actual heavy lift is this, right? Like we talk about site speed a lot, and SEOs will go, just go and look at the JavaScript and how that fires in and clean up the code. But like to a dev, that could be weeks and weeks and weeks of code refactoring. But an SEO's gone, oh yeah, Google says it's important, so we better go and do it, without actually knowing if it takes 10 grand worth of dev time, are you actually going to see 10 grand plus in return from an SEO perspective? It's very much just like, oh yeah, Google said we should go and do it, so let's go away and do it.